So let's just dive right in. Can a plant, one that was used as medicine for centuries before being outlawed for decades, actually hold a key to fighting one of the world's most feared diseases? That's the huge question we're tackling today.
You know, the story of cannabis is pretty wild. It goes all the way from being a cornerstone of ancient medicine and spiritual practices to suddenly becoming a prohibited substance. But now it's having this major scientific comeback. Researchers are, in a way, dusting off those old books and using modern science to ask, is its potential to treat diseases like cancer for real? To really get what's happening in labs today, we've got to take a step back and look at the long and kind of complicated history of cannabis as a medicine.
For literally thousands of years, cannabis was a staple in traditional medicine cabinets. But then, fast forward to the 20th century, and its whole identity shifts. It becomes known almost exclusively as a recreational drug. And that leads to legal crackdowns all over the world. But now, here in the 21st century, the pendulum is swinging back in a big way. Scientists are re-examining the plant, not for its recreational side, but for its incredibly complex chemistry and how it might be used against cancer.
Okay, so the cannabis plant isn't just one thing. Think of it more like a tiny chemical factory. It makes over 100 of these compounds called cannabinoids. For our purposes, we're going to focus on the two most famous ones. THC, which you probably know is responsible for the high, and then there's CBD, which is non-psychoactive. Getting this difference is absolutely essential for everything else we're going to talk about.
So, how in the world do compounds from a plant interact with our bodies so deeply? Well, the answer is just fascinating. It turns out our bodies have a built-in system that is perfectly designed to communicate with them.
Believe it or not, every one of us has something called the endocannabinoid system, or ECS for short. You can think of it as a master regulator, this huge network of signals and receptors that keeps our bodies in balance. I mean, it's involved in everything from how we feel pain, to our mood, even our appetite. The craziest part? Our bodies actually make their own cannabinoids. Probably the simplest way to wrap your head around the ECS is the whole lock and key idea. The cannabinoids, whether they come from a plant or are made by our own bodies, are the keys. They're designed to fit into specific locks, which are called receptors. And when that key clicks into the lock, it triggers a response. So let's take a look at the two main types of these locks.
And this right here shows the difference perfectly. On one hand, you've got CB1 receptors. These are the locks found mostly in our brain and central nervous system. So when THC, the key, fits into this lock, it produces those psychoactive effects we associate with cannabis. But CB2 receptors are a totally different story. They're found mainly on our immune cells. When cannabinoids interact with these, they can affect things like inflammation and immune responses, but, and this is key, without causing a high. This difference is a huge reason why CBD is getting so much attention for therapeutic use.
Okay, so we have the plant compounds and we have the body's receptor system. Now for the main event, how does all of this connect to actually fighting cancer? Let's zoom right into the cellular level to see the mechanisms that have researchers so excited. What we see in lab studies is pretty remarkable. It seems like cannabinoids can fight cancer cells from a bunch of different angles, all at once. For instance, they can trigger something called apoptosis, which is basically telling a cancer cell to self-destruct. They can also kickstart autophagy, which is like a cellular cleanup crew that gets rid of bad cells. They can even put the brakes on a cancer cell's ability to multiply. And get this, they might even be able to cut off a tumor's supply lines by stopping new blood vessels from growing and block its ability to spread to other parts of the body. It's like a full-on assault.
But, and this is a really big but, while those lab results are incredibly promising, we have to ground ourselves in what's happening right now. As this quote points out, knowing that something happens is very different from knowing exactly how it happens. The precise, nitty-gritty details of the mechanisms are still being figured out.
And that brings us to the crucial gap, right? The gap between what we see happening in a petri dish and what actually works for a patient in a hospital bed.
As of today, the most proven role for cannabinoids in cancer care isn't as a cure, but as something called supportive care. This just means the focus is on improving a patient's quality of life. It's all about managing the absolutely brutal side effects of the disease and its treatments, things like relieving chronic pain, controlling that awful nausea from chemo, and stimulating appetite to fight off dangerous weight loss.
And this has led to a few government-approved drugs. You've got medications like dronabinol and nabilone, which are basically synthetic versions of THC, and they're prescribed specifically for that chemo-induced nausea. Now, what's really important to see here is that these aren't raw cannabis. They're standardized, pharmaceutical-grade medicines designed to target one specific symptom. Which, of course, leads to the million-dollar question.
If it shows all this promise in the lab, and it already helps patients with their symptoms, what's the holdup? Why aren't cannabinoids a frontline weapon in the fight against cancer itself?
Well, the answer is it's complicated. There are some major hurdles. For starters, the chemical makeup of cannabis plants can be wildly different, which makes consistent dosing really hard. Then there are THC's psychoactive effects, which can just be too much for very sick patients to handle. The patchwork of laws makes it incredibly difficult to run the large-scale human trials we need. And because of that, we don't have enough solid clinical data. We have no idea what a standard dose should be, and we don't fully understand how cannabinoids might interact with other life-saving cancer drugs.
So, after all that, where does this leave us? And what does the future of this research actually look like? So what's the big takeaway here? The science strongly suggests that cannabinoids have undeniable potential, not as some standalone miracle cure, but as what scientists call adjuvants. An adjuvant is basically a powerful helper, something that makes standard treatments like chemotherapy work better, or makes their side effects easier to handle. The bottom line is, the hard evidence needed to call cannabis a primary cure for cancer just isn't there, yet. And that leaves us with the ultimate question for the future, doesn't it? Will researchers finally overcome all those hurdles, the standardization, the regulations, the clinical trials? Will cannabinoids one day make that leap from being a supporting actor in cancer care to being one of the stars of the show? Right now, the answer is a very powerful and very tantalizing maybe.